Well, it's my privilege to share this site with you folks. This is a really special site, and I'll try to convince you that in the next 10, 15 minutes. One of the first things that makes it special is that there's over 1,000 petroglyphs on this cliff wall. You can go to other archaeological sites and see more petroglyphs, but they'll span multiple cultures and up to 10,000 years. So one of the things that makes this wall special is that we believe that the vast majority of these petroglyphs were all done by one culture, that's the Southern Sedona culture, and they flourished here in the Verde Valley between 600 and 1400 AD. Another thing that makes this wall special is that the archaeologists actually believe that the majority of this artwork was done in a very narrow 300-year period. I'm watching where I put my hands now. And bracketing 1100 AD. So that is a very narrow span of time, archaeologically speaking. Yet another thing that makes this wall special is that none of the symbols have been overwritten or obliterated. You go to some of our other archaeological sites, and you will see archaic or Paleo-Indian petroglyphs overwritten by the Sonoans, overwritten by the Yavapai, overwritten by the Apache. Here, since it's all thought to be one culture, they seem to respect each symbol, so they didn't overwrite them. They're still intact. Another thing that makes this wall special, it's the only one in the Verde Valley. Yes, there's other cliff sites with petroglyphs on it, but as Dave already explained, it has a pretty advanced solar calendar function on it, and it's got a whole lot of other symbolic artwork. And lastly, it has a near perfect north-south alignment. It's only off by 8 degrees, and that's what lends itself to being useful as a solar calendar. Now, in these cultures, in this day and age, cracks and cliff faces were considered sacred or mystical. They believed their gods came and went from the upper world to the underworld through these cracks. And often these cracks were adorned with symbolic artwork, perhaps in an attempt to communicate to their deities. And over here is a series I like to point out to people. Here we have 2 supernatural deities and an array of wildlife art. And we know that these are supernatural deities because they have orbs on either side of their head. Think of a halo in Christian art. Well, these orbs on either side of their head would mean the same sort of thing to this culture. Divinity mixed with some supernatural power. And this one's male. He's wearing a loincloth. So perhaps this artist was placing these petroglyphs here to express gratitude to the union of Father Sky and Mother Earth, and from that union emanated the big game species so important to the Sonoans. Now, as you look across this wall, you'll see the vast majority of all these symbols look very similar in technique and style. It's called the West Beaver Creek style. And it consists of having a really crisp outer outline, and then they chip away the material in between. And to do this, they used a two-handed technique called indirect percussion. And that consisted of having a harder chisel stone and a hammer stone. And that gave the artist a great deal of control about how the symbol would come out. And this one here that looks like a snake, for years it was interpreted as a snake because snakes are indeed sacred to these cultures. But when you compare it to an air photo of the Verde River, it's a near perfect map, river meander by river meander. And so now
it is. Yeah.
I was just looking at that on my cell phone, trying to figure that out where it was.
We do indeed believe it's a map of the extended Sonoan community. At its height, the Sonoan culture had a 50 to 100 room pueblo every 2 miles from Camp Verde all the way up to Wapatki Pueblo, which is east of Flagstaff. That's about 90 airline miles. Archaeological population estimates are about 5,000 people. Lots of trade, lots of different clans, lots of people sharing the site. This is the only site like this in the entire geographic extent I just mentioned. So we think it's a shared sacred site. And we know from these test pits that over 40 inches of the soil has accumulated after the Sonoans left. But here at the cliff, if you get down to the soil layer, contemporary with the Sonoan occupancy, here at the cliff face, it's still very soft. Same test pits, same soil layer on the other side, it's as hard as pavement. So the interpretation of that is that for 800 years, hundreds of people approached this cliff to see ceremonies here, thus compacting that soil, but only very precious few are ever allowed to approach the cliff and work on it.
Sure. Makes sense.
So if this crack might have a celebration of gratitude, I'm going to show you an evil crack. and it's guarded by a deity. So the Hopi have a deity called Masao, and one of Masao's functions for that culture is to protect this upper world from the evil spirits that dwell in the underworld. And the Hopi depict Masao as kind of like an ogre. He's got big bulging eyes, a huge flaring nose, and a mouth with a tongue hanging out. So it's thought that this petroglyph of Masao was put next to that big crack to protect these communities from the evil spirits that might want to emanate from that crack.
It's fascinating. It looks like a Japanese or Chinese evil spirit.
There are some incredible global parallels in symbolism.
Yeah.
Over
Which is kind of
here,
worrisome.
over here we have a petroglyph of a shaman. Now the Hopi have an exorcism ritual. At the end of that exorcism ritual, the exorcist removes one of his or her moccasins and stamps that foot 3 times, and that dispels the evil spirits bothering the patient. And if you notice here, this foot seems to have something like toes coming off the end of it, whereas this one's still clad in his moccasin. So this petroglyph has been interpreted as being that shaman doing an exorcism ritual. Of course, other people just see a park ranger picking up a bag of a bag of trash. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is that anytime you're visiting an archaeological site that's prehistoric, and a docent's sharing an interpretation of symbolic art, it's best archaeological conjecture, right? Because by definition, it's prehistoric. There's no written record. So what we share with you are insights derived by parallel cultures or descendant cultures. Now, the Hopi today consists of 36 clans. 6 of those clans claim to be direct descendants of the Sonoran. So when the Hopi visit this site with our archaeologists, they share their insights with that archaeologist, and that's what we're trained to share with you. Here we have an indirect percussion family group. Here we have a neat semicircular array of symbols that we really have no idea what it means whatsoever. It may be an emergence story, but we don't know. And the Hopi have a very dour and fatalistic approach to life. And they also have a very strict moral code, which puts community first, selfish needs at the last. And if you violate that moral code, there's very severe repercussions for you and the community. And so it's thought it might represent that attitude in life that, you know, you're trapped in this maze, it's a hard life, and there's no escape. Neither of those are my favorite ones. The Hopi do have a tradition of greeting long-lost friends with a special handshake. Will you be my eternal friend for a second? All right. So this handshake is called Nakwa. And if you look at our hands on end, you'll see that the pattern made is virtually identical to the contents of those maize. We're lucky we all have 2 hands. If this is a shared sacred site, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people getting together periodically, perhaps exchanging nakwa. So I like that. That's more upbeat. However, the short story is we'll never know precisely what that artist was trying to convey. Let's keep our eye out for that rattlesnake. He's long gone over there.
Yeah, he's heard this story already, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
So over here, the first petroglyph I like to share is of this Indian maiden. And she is coming of age as a woman and eligible for marriage. We know she's female, there's no loincloth. We know she's coming of age as a woman and eligible for marriage because she has her hair done up in these squash blossom buns or butterfly whirls, depending on what you like to call it. But it's those big whirls that the Hopi use on their young women, and they keep their hair up in that hairstyle until they're married. So this petroglyph may have been put on this wall to ask for divine assistance for all those young women going through that awkward phase of maturing into womanhood and seeking a suitable spouse. Over here, we have 2 petroglyphs of women in the birthing posture. This one's very pregnant, this one's not. This petroglyph may have been put here to ask for divine assistance in the difficult and dangerous process of childbirth, which of course was a leading cause of female mortality in this era. This one may have been put here to ask for divine assistance in conception. She's in the birthing posture, but she is not pregnant, and there's no image of an infant anywhere near her. Up here, we have several interpretations of this petroglyph. The one I share is that it's asking for divine assistance in spreading fertility to the community. think of it as a deity, and we do think it's a deity because it has a misshapen head. That's an aura that depicts divinity.
A halo.
Yeah, kind of like a halo. And has a burdened basket of seed on his back, and with his other hand, he's sowing seed down on the community.
Sure, and that fits with the rest of the petroglyphs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And up here, people always ask, which is the highest petroglyph? So I point out the scorpion. Here's a nice little scorpion.
Huh.
Scorpion are very neat creatures from the right distance, kind of like rattlesnakes. And then down here we have this open spiral. And this open spiral is pretty much universally accepted to be a migration symbol. The ancient southwestern Indian cultures all have extensive oral histories of major arduous migration events. And if you think about it, if you're lucky enough to have your community prosper in this very harsh environment, ultimately you're going to outstrip your resources, right? You're going to either use up your firewood, deplete your game, or exhaust your soils, or all three. And your only recourse is to move the entire community to some other location. Now remember, there are no beasts of burden here. The only domesticated animals are dogs and turkey. So anything of value had to be carried on your back or left behind. I always get this editorial comment.
It's an interesting bird.
Yeah, that's a canyon wren.
Okay.
So the Navajo, the Hopi, the Zuni, just to name a few of ancient southwestern Indian cultures, all have numerous oral traditions of these migration events. Over here, we have a spectacular example of malicious vandalism.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, really.
We're very, very fortunate here in that we only have 3 or 4 examples of graffiti vandalism and a few bullet holes. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to the previous 7 ranch owners. They all seem to respect this site and kept their cowhands and their families away from it. You all have just seen how incredibly accessible the site is. It's nearly 1,000 years old, and it's in incredibly good shape. So the Forest Service acquired this site in the mid-90s and put up the fencing, I believe in '99, and went to a docent management style to keep it further protected from vandalism. But unfortunately, just last month we discovered a fresh set of initials in our desert varnish. Now you can tell that Dave and I can see the entire site virtually, and I like to think if you guys saw anybody about to do anything to the wall, you'd yell at them. So we think it happened at night, but we don't know. So the nonsense still continues.
There's an open labyrinth there, spiral.
Yeah,
It's
that's
open.
the
That's
migration.
that's
That's the
migration.
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 What about down here? It looks like a,
This?
well, yeah, that it looks like letters, but I don't think it
Oh,
is.
that's a comb. That's the,
Oh, okay, okay.
and by that's what they call or how they describe it. It's not really a comb. It's thought to be an ancient tally.
Okay.
So if you're migrating through here and this is your 3rd time here, you would make a tally mark.
Ah, okay, okay.
So
And
go ahead.
the thing that looks like upside down or
Trident?
yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. No one's told me about
Okay.
that.
So when they were here in those 300 years, this was sacred site. So they only allowed certain people to carve this. So you didn't have children
No.
messing with their parents.
Yeah, everybody, yeah,
So everything on there that's old is intentional. It means
absolutely.
okay.
It was very special.
Okay.
You had to be a clan elder responsible for maintaining a tradition of a religious ritual,
Okay.
or you had to be a shaman recording a psychic journey or a real journey.
Okay.
But no, your
cool.
kids weren't allowed to scribble on the blackboard.
Yeah.
So over here I like to show this series of nested figure 8s. And that's thought to depict an eclipse event. Think of the sun and moon pulling apart. Can you see that over there?
Yeah.
And then the last thing I like to point out while I'm on this part of the wall is that this petroglyph that looks like a letter M is actually interpreted as 2 men carrying a slumped dead body between them, and that's the spirit of the dead body about to go into the underworld.
Wow. Wow, that's cool.
So here endeth my front end.